So I want to welcome you all to this quarterly Customer Connect event. We are going to talk targeting revisited. Super excited to talk about this topic. Um, so for those who have not met with a while, my name is Stevie. I'm a customer success engineer here at NetBeez. Been with the company coming up on 6 years as of December. I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. So let's talk about the who, the what, and the why. We'll start there. And then we'll talk about ideal target design. We'll talk about advanced targeting a bit. And then we'll finish up, we'll talk about 15, as well as, what's coming down the pipeline. And then we'll open up for some Q&A. So who and why now? So who is this webinar for? Well, it's for a lot of different people. New users, kind of one of the obvious ones, right? But also some of our customers have been with us for a long time, that have a different need, right? So their NetBeez configuration strategy needs a change because their needs have changed, right? Definitely the case for a lot of our longtime customers where, their previous need 5 years ago has changed, right? And they now have new pain points they need to address at NetBeez. So the other question is why now? So this is good to talk about every couple years, even every year in some cases. NetBeez has evolved a lot, as well as the industry has evolved a lot too. We're up to what, Wi-Fi 7 at this point. I've seen some of our customers talk about. We also have a new UI and UX coming in 2026. The general design philosophy will remain the same. It's just getting a very big UI overhaul. A lot of new functionality is coming as well. So learning, the configuration side of things will be very useful as we transition to a new dashboard next year. Now, what are targets? This might seem like a very easy question, but we're going to talk about targets and we're going to talk about tests. They are not the same thing. A target will have a lot of tests, but a target can have one test. So I define as a target is either a single or a group of tests against a specific like FQDN or IP, and they can be grouped together as you see in the picture here. That is one target. You could also break this out into 5 targets if you so wish as well. And then the test is going to be every single green bubble that's filled in. That is an individual test. And when we talk about tests, we're talking about real-time tests, not scheduled tests. So the difference, real-time tests are going to be ping, DNS, HTTP, traceroute, and path analysis. Scheduled tests are going to be speed tests, iPerf, VoIP, and now custom command. Now, talking about real-time tests, they run at set intervals that can be changed, right? But these are usually recommended to keep these default. So ping will run every 5 seconds. DNS will run every 30, HTTP GET request every minute, traceroute every 2 minutes, and path analysis every 5. Whereas a speed test might run once an hour, twice an hour, 3 times a day, something of that nature. But just to reiterate, a test is a green box. So when we talk about most of our customers are capped at 50 tests, that's 50 green boxes. Technically, you could have more targets configured than tests when it comes to like targets per or tests per agent, right? You could technically have, 100 different targets with 2 tests each for total 200 tests, and then you could assign a group of 50 to 4 different agents, right? That's definitely possible as well. But let's talk about ideal target design. So, what should you target? I've broken this down into 6 categories. High availability, so things like Google or anything with extremely high uptime and availability. VoIP applications, so things like Genesis 5.9, 8x8, Ring Central. Our gateway test, any of the major SaaS applications, so like Microsoft, HubSpot, Salesforce, Jira, Atlassian, like there's a bunch. Your cloud, and we're going to talk a little about more about this later. Same thing with data center, but things like Azure, AWS, Oracle, etc. So let's talk mistakes to avoid. So going back, most of our customers are running 50 tests per agent, right? That's the cap, and it's there for a couple reasons. One of them is to solve the issue that we're seeing here to our right. This can get very noisy, particularly relevant on Wi-Fi deployments, where the Wi-Fi is just not nearly stable as the wire. But in general, this amount of tests, and by by the way, this is not even the most, that's just the most it'll fit on a page. This is just not ideal. It's it's not going to deliver the value you need on NetBeez. So the two questions that I always ask, what do users complain about, and also what's important to you? And then what is actionable? If one of these bubbles turns red and sends you an email, if you are going to ignore it, you need to call in the question, should you be monitoring it? NetBees should mostly be configured in a proactive detection way and also useful for troubleshooting. There are exceptions to the rule, but that should be the exception, not the majority. So if you have 30 or 40 tests, to me, 80 to 90% of them should be actionable. You might have a couple that maybe you won't alert for, right? You just want like the test data or whatever, and that's fine. But you should really have most of your agents actionable. Focus on anything that's really important. So something, your leadership is going to want you to monitor. Something that, um, you know, sorry about that. Something that your leadership is going to want to monitor, something that your users are going to open tickets about, anything that's really important. Another thing is don't run the gambit. Every test should have a meaning to it. So when we talk about that, we talk about being intentional with your design philosophy. So when we talk about SaaS targets, so things like, Salesforce, Jira, HubSpot, it makes sense to run ping path analysis or ping DNS HTTP and either traceroute or path analysis. We typically don't recommend to run both traceroute and path analysis. It really depends on what you want. Traceroute is going to be more for alerting, and path analysis is going to be more for troubleshooting. The thing about traceroute is it's a single fixed route that will time out after 30 hops. So usually learning with traceroute is very specific to certain deployments, whereas path analysis is a really good troubleshooting tool. VoIP applications, ping and path analysis only. You almost never going to need to resolve the DNS or do an HTTP GET request. The cloud might also have DNS, but ping and path analysis is big. And if you're testing a SaaS application hosted in your environment, or in your cloud rather, then maybe HTTP makes sense. But most cases, we're not seeing it that much. Again, really only that's more in the public cloud side of things. High availability tests should have all four. And then data centers should kind of fall in line with cloud. So mostly ping and path analysis. Now, talk about advanced targeting. I'm actually going to show you all these, but one of them is DNS resolution. Obviously, you can just set up a DNS test like normal, just click DNS and hit next. But there is a more intricate way to really test DNS as well. So we're going to show you that. That involves setting up a couple different resources. Um, Agent to cloud/data center. I've actually lumped these together for one reason, and that is its design is the same. So the first question you have to ask is the cloud or data center an extension of your network? Is it on the same subnet? If the answer to that is yes, your best option is to deploy a VM in the cloud or data center, install Ubuntu, and then just run the curl command to install NetBeez software within Ubuntu. That is the best option because then you can actually target the agent as a destination from all of your sites or remote users, for example. And you're actually going to get, to the front of the data center, through the firewall, through a switch stack, and actually to where your environment's physically hosted. So you go a little deeper than just targeting something like the public IP of the data center. So that is what you do if you're not on the same subnet or if it's not part of your, extended network. So for the data center, you would just target the public IP of the data center. For the cloud, you would most likely just target, your FQDN within your cloud websites and stuff like that with Azure AWS. Again, it doesn't quite go as far as having an agent in your cloud, but it still gives you a pretty good amount of value. And then lastly, gateway tests. So this is just the best way of doing this is just doing this under target templates. So what we'll do here is I'm going to stop sharing for a second and switch over. Perfect. And then we will go to my dashboard. I'm going to build some of these out here. So you can go through target templates with DNS. I'm going to show you how to do it more custom. So we're just going to call this Google DNS. You can name it whatever you would like with any description you'd like. That's just for your own tracking. And if we do google.com, What you can do is what a lot of people might do is just do the four you want, and then you could specify a DNS server here, right? 8.8.8.8. Now, then if you add another resource, you can also then do your ping path analysis to this DNS server. Most people like to separate their DNS testing away from their traditional testing. So we're going to do that here. We're going to delete everything but the DNS test. We're going to add a second one. Just remember, if you want to delete, you go to the trash can at the far right-hand side. So we're going to save and we're going to save. So now what we're doing is, oh, this one did not have it. So let's put that back in because we didn't save it the first time. Oh, one other person's coming in. Perfect. Sorry about that. So we're gonna go ahead and save. So now we have both of the DNS tests configured, right? So now we're gonna test this specific DNS. So by default, whenever you configure a test, it's always gonna follow, your default DNS configuration, right? So in my case, if I click on this, you can see like these are my home default DNS, right? So going back to targets here, we'll start again because somebody just joined. So we're gonna call this Google DNS. And yeah, we will go back to google.com and then we're going to add two DNS tests. So I'm just going to click this twice, make life easier. I'll do that one and we'll do 8.8.4.4. But you can also use your own set of DNS servers. You can specify different DNS servers than what the default is as well. Then we're going to make two resources, one for each DNS server we're testing. So you're by default going to have two resources and then one additional resource for each DNS server. And then you'll have one additional test for each DNS server as well. So we'll click next. We'll go to groups. We'll just assign this to our default group, which is perfect. We're not going to configure anything additional. We'll leave our default alerting configs. And we'll again click save. And then when we go to an agent, what'll happen is it's going to group these together. So like I said, I already have this made elsewhere as well. So I just prefer like to separate them. So here you can see, okay, these are the two that we just made. And then when you click on these two, let me actually extend the top one there. You can actually see which one is which DNS server is which is really cool. So this is the best way to specifically test DNS resolution across your network if that is the goal of this particular kind of test. Most people will do this as well as just testing DNS through their default DNS all the time. But remember, you can always specify which DNS server you want to use on all testing. So now that we have that one done, let's talk about testing the cloud or the data center. So I have a agent deployed on my Unranked server. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do a custom test again, and we'll call this data center, make life easier. And all I have to do is put in the public IP, or in this case, I'm going to call this server number 2. I'm doing this because it's going to pull the IP address set by the DHCP server automatically, so I don't have to worry about typoing it. So we'll just do ping and path analysis. We're going to assign it to an entire group, and this is actually pretty neat. So we'll next, save. Now, here's the question. Will the server test against itself? The answer to that is no. So when you go to test and you go to ping, and we look at this like ping matrix here, you can see server number 2 is not testing against itself. So while mesh testing is not generally supported by NetBeez in large scale because you are limited to 50 tests, if you have a small scale test or if you have a couple different like data centers, you can test all of your agents, all the data centers, and you don't have to worry about potential overlap, especially if you're testing out from that data center as well, which is really cool. And then the last one is the gateway test. This one is the easiest to set up. There's actually a template I recommend using instead of doing it manually. It's one of the only ones I do manually myself. You just click gateway, hit add. I recommend leaving it at 5 seconds. I don't think you should make it longer or shorter. And then hit save. And the cool thing about this is that it will identify each agent's independent local gateway, which is really good for remote workers as well as network agents as well. So you don't have to like try to configure a bunch of different IP addresses and assign groups to different ones. It'll identify, the first gateway that hits, which is really cool. So you don't have to do any additional configurations. So with that said, I want to talk. So we got through the demo, but there is more. And that more part is the custom command. So this is something that just came out a couple weeks ago. And instead of showing you this, I'm going to show you the article we just posted about it. And I have links to everything here at the end too. So I have links to like a bunch of VoIP testing information and also this article, as well as some of my best practice stuff. But this gives you kind of an overview. And one thing to note, this was changed recently, right before release. We added Python support. So this was something that was not in the initial design, but we added it. Um, the TLDR, and I'll be honest, I don't have the most knowledge when it comes to things like Python and Bash and everything, but basically the TLDR is anything you can console, run on the console level. So like you can do a CLI speed test, is like the one that we see a lot. TCP dump is another one I see a lot. Anything you can do there, you can most likely do here. So this will add a lot of synthetic testing that wasn't previously supported within NetBeez, which is really cool. Here is a bunch of articles, and I have these linked in the end here as well, talking about some of the things we've tested, like particularly this one. HTTP metrics is really big, so we actually have this here. So this is extended HTTP testing. So you can see DNS lookup time, connection times, handshake, total time, etc. So this allows you to do more than just a simple GET request, which is really nice. But there's definitely, um, going back here, there's definitely a lot of options. And what we're really excited about is seeing what our customers are going to do with it. Because there's probably going to be, a handful of things you won't be able to do with it, I suspect. But I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting use cases customers are going to come up with. And we're really excited to hear people share them with us. Please, 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 post it on the community.netbeez.net or let our team know or let me know some of the cool things you do with it because we definitely want to show it with all of our customers. You guys use NetBeez day in and day out for different reasons and different needs. So ideally, you'll be able to provide us, right, with a lot of really cool things to share. Um, to make this test, it's just under test and then custom command. You click add scheduled test. You can do it by group or agents. You can select a bunch of agents or specific group. You'll drop your script in here. We have a metric and a unit function, how long it'll run for. And then here's where you can schedule it. So like this is where you'll probably most likely do this like every 5 or 10 minutes. You can do it even tighter, like every two, but you just have to click all the every two buttons. A lot of it's going to depend on like how long does it need to run, how much resources does it take up. So keep that in mind. You'll have to experiment with that a little bit before you kind of lock in your final parameters. But you can do different run modes as well, just like normal. I think most of our customers are going to opt for parallel. And then you can also make an alert profile for this, which is also really cool. So you can go to schedule test error, and you can do one for custom command. We can't do performance metrics yet, just because custom command is going to be very, very different from customer to customer, but you can do metrics based off of it not running. So you can actually get alerts based off of that. So with that, so I have a bunch of links here, and then here's a bunch of links to my best practices and my advanced targeting, which is kind of a recap of what I've went over here today. And I'm going to send a copy of the recording. There's a lot of people who couldn't make it today, unfortunately, but I'll send a copy of the recording as well as any questions that I can't answer. The link to our custom command blog. And then I linked a lot of blogs for VoIP. And the reason for that is I kind of glossed over it a little bit, talking about VoIP applications and stuff. There are some that's harder to test, like Zoom, for example, in Teams, but other things like Genesis, RingCentral, Vonage, Twilio, Nice, they have a lot more options with testing their infrastructure a lot, which is really cool. So I wanted to share that as well. So we're at the 20-minute mark. I did want to open up for some questions. I'm gonna put a pause here and say anything custom command related, I will most likely have to ask the team and follow up with everybody. And that's just because my understanding of Bash and Python is very limited.